No, we're not. No. We're a country of settlers, not of immigrants. Settlers are people that build a new country that was barren. Immigrants come to a country already built.
And same with xenophobic what's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general?
Xenophobic nationalism is better.
We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture. We should have assimilation.
Which, do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
What is
based
the dominant
on
culture?
European and Christian values and identity. That is the dominant culture.
White Christian,
it's rooted in European identity. That has been the dominant culture.
Just to be
clear. And we're not letting people assimilate to that. We're saying you should keep your culture, and this is why our culture is so divided.
A dominant white European culture.
I mean, that is what America is. It's rooted in European identity and Christian values. That's what it has been. Would you really disagree with that?
One of the reasons we're living through a constitutional crisis is that we no longer have a Christian nation, but we have a Christian form of government, and they're incompatible. So you cannot have liberty if you do not have a Christian population.
What is it then, if that's not the identity of America?
Woman, who, by the way, is named Sarah Stock, presents a clearly defined view of American identity. At least she's presenting some sort of definition of what it means to be American. She's offering an affirmative explanation of American culture. On the other hand, Sam cannot provide a definition at all. Instead, he offers a cliche. He says America is a melting pot without explaining what that means exactly. It's because anything white is automatically bad and bigoted and evil. So he could just say, oh, well, so you're advocating for something white? And with his friends in his world, that's enough. That's the end of the conversation. Of course, is that America has not always been a melting pot, as that term is generally understood. This country was composed of white, Western European Christians almost exclusively in its first years. This is the core of America. And then afterwards, white, Western European Christians were still the dominant demographic for much of our history. Melting into what? And for what purpose? That's the question, Sam. What are we melting into? Why? What is our country exactly, Sam? What is it? What does it mean to be an American?
But hate can't be the face of the American dream.
What is an American? What is America? That's a question as old as time. Well, as old as 1776, that is. Now, you see, certain members of the online conservative space have started to rewrite the dialogue as to our founding, our history, and what it means to actually be an American. They've done this through a lot of ways, straight up lying, cherry picking, and Lord knows how much xenophobic rhetoric. Now, I've thought long and hard about how best to tackle this subject in this video. You see, best I can figure is left and right have a bit of a different definition when it comes to America. Traditionally speaking, many leftists are not particularly patriotic and criticize the country heavily, as is their right. Many people on the right also don't particularly like to criticize America at all. It's a little bit of a conundrum. You provide any evidence to one of the contrary, and suddenly you are, well, a Nazi or a communist. Now, I have a particular leftist leaning myself, but I like to recognize the good and the bad that America has done. So as the topic of this video, I figured the best way to discuss it directly is to divide it into three subjects. One, directly addressing what it is that you saw in the intro of this video about what they were saying and kind of why it's BS. Two, explaining the good that is being an American, the pride we have in our country, the stories that I myself will speak when I want to be patriotic and paint America as an overall good nation. And lastly, I want to address the rightful criticisms that our country has and why some people seem to ignore those in order to paint this pearly white picture. You see, the three people you saw at the beginning of this video are going to come up a lot in this channel. Well, two of them, that is, Charlie Kirk and Matt Walsh, with this description of this video is going to address directly. You see, these fellers are not particularly my favorite type of folk. They both lie, manipulate, cherry pick, and just overall misinterpret everything that is decent or good and factual. I don't particularly like these individuals. I might get into that more later, but I want to address specifically the things that they said at the start of this video. For they have presented this sort of thesis about what they deem America is, and much in agreement with that blonde woman you saw at the start as well, whose name I can't remember nor do I care to. Now, I know for a fact that most conservatives, most Americans, will agree with me when I say we are a country of immigrants. Most Americans agree when I say we don't want to be xenophobic. However, the folks currently pushing the narrative, pushing that envelope ever so slightly, well, they are a little xenophobic. They are a little nationalistic. We don't like that kind of stuff where I came from. I want to first address Matt Walsh when he says this.
Imagine that I told you, let's say I told you about an exciting new organization that I just founded. I said, I just founded an organization. You're going to love it. And you ask me, well, what is the organization? And I say, oh, it's an organization with a bunch of different kinds of people. It's a melting pot of people. Do you see how you would still have absolutely no clue what the hell sort of organization it is?
You see, he is replying to Sam Cedar have a debate about the identity of America with, again, that blonde woman. What Matt Walsh is doing is he's misinterpreting Sam Cedar's statements. They're talking about a country, Matt. They're not just plain dumb saying, oh, we're all happy-go-lucky DEI initiative hires. No, they're talking about a country. What a country should be. The republic, Matt. They're discussing the republic and making a country. They're not simply saying, oh, yes, we need to be a melting pot for a melting pot's sake. No, they're discussing what's better for the country. But you don't care about that. You want to paint Sam Cedar as an idiot, as you so often do. But to answer your question directly, we are a republic, Matt. We are a country of multiple different populations. We are a nation of immigrants, of pilgrims, of settlers, founders, and everything in between. It is a complex nation, as all countries are. It is a nation that you seem to want to gloss over all the things in history that might disprove you, but we'll get to that in a later subject.
Because anything white is automatically bad and bigoted and evil, so he could just say, oh, well, so you're advocating for something white?
You see, Matt, what Sam Cedar is saying in that there debate, he's not attacking white people. Go to camera 2 for a second. I got to share some fact with you. It is okay to be white. It is indeed okay to be white, and I hope y'all realize that. Nobody on the left particularly attacks folks for just being white. That's a misnomer. It's not true. I myself, I know this is hard to believe, happen to be white. I will wait a second for you all to regain your composure at that disturbing fact. Nobody on the left argues against being white. The problem is, and the only point that the people will throw up a fit, fight, or recall like, hey, what are you talking about, is when folks on the right will go, no, actually, we should all be white. Because that is exactly what that blonde woman and what Matt Walsh are suggesting. They suggest that all of America should be Western Christian white folk. How does that work now? They will never answer that question directly because they don't have an answer to it that could ever be digestible by the American people. And they know that, hence why they speak around the subject so often. That woman in particular describes what she deems as the perfect America is one that identifies solely with her belief. I've given this country about 10 years of my life so far, and I'll probably give it a few more after that. The America they are describing is not an America I get to live in. The America they are describing is not an America most of my friends get to live in. It's not an America I think most folks want to live in. But they can't defend what they want. So they lie about what Sam Cedar's saying and misinterpret it and just basically look to you and say, hey, we're the smart ones here. Don't listen to anything of reason. Just listen to us. The problem, unfortunately, for some leftists is that we kind of got away from the narrative. We stopped trying to say, hey, racism is bad because of this and this, and we just assumed everybody thought that racism is bad. And in fairness, I do believe most people think that way. However, in our political narrative so far, we seem to have tilted very far to a different particular talking. Now, Charlie Kirk, who I have used his clips as well, now he seems to have a very specific definition about what America should be as well.
So you cannot have liberty if you do not have a Christian population.
That particular clip has been used in defense of Matt Walsh's previous clip, as well as that blonde woman from that debate, over and over again. It seems to be a well-researched, well-spoken ideology that Charlie Kirk himself has talked about numerous times. Now, I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details of Charlie Kirk because what he's saying is ultimately irrelevant. The point is he's cherry-picking facts. In that initial clip you saw, and I encourage you to watch the totality of the video, nowhere does he mention the Constitution. Nowhere does he mention the First Amendment. You know, that lovely little thing that we all supposedly read in school. But it's also something else that bothers me. You see, when you cherry-pick your evidence, you miss anything else that might disprove you. And that's not how science likes to work. Charlie Kirk says we are a nation of settlers, of builders. That's true. We are a nation of settlers and builders. But you forget the work of everybody else besides select few individuals. We are a nation of settlers, builders, of immigrants, of Christians, of Muslims, of theists, of deists, of atheists, of any kind of atheist you want to be. It's a good thing about America. Be whatever you want. Hell, nowadays, you can be Pope. But to get more into the nitty-gritty about what Charlie Kirk said in that segment, I'd like to point out a couple of things in history that, well, he seemed to forget. is one, as I mentioned earlier, he does not mention the Constitution nor the First Amendment in the entirety of that video. Don't seem to think he knows what it says. He mentions a lot of other things that are all factually true for the most part, minus the Bible verses. He has a habit of getting those a little misinformed, but smarter people than I study the Bible. I'll let them speak on it. What he does forget is the fact that democracy, of which we are, has existed well before Christianity ever did. It existed in Athens, of which we have modeled much of our republic after. The Roman Republic popularized it a bit more in Europe, and you'll never guess where we got some of their ideals, well before they ever became Christian. The core fundamentals of our country are not built solely around religion. It is an undeniable fact that religion had a very large part to play in the founding of our country. It is also undeniable the fact that our country does not solely exist to propagate one particular religion. What Matt Walsh, what Charlie Kirk failed to reiterate is that what was deemed white in the past was not what is white today. What was deemed the correct type of Christian in the past was not the correct type of Christian today. And that has changed over time. Catholics and Protestants do not get along. I point to the Irish troubles. I point you to our own country in which Catholics and Protestants have a long history of not getting along. The Irish were not white back in the day. They were treated just as poorly as some other folks. That's changed a lot. One last thing I want to say about Charlie Kirk here and some of his statements. He mentions that we have a conflict of faith, and that's what's causing the core issue in our country. That's not the issue. The issue, Charlie, you let me call you that because I ain't got to respect to use your last name. The issue is we have a conflict of a few minority that deems anybody else that does not worship the way they do, that does not believe or think the way they do, somehow is un-American. And that if they don't have their way, if they don't deem the country running by their ideals, then it ain't worth having the country at all. That's where our conflict comes in. Because again, as you describe, as both of them describe, as that woman describes, that is not a country I get to live in and practice freely. Not a country that many of you actually get to live in and practice freely either, whether you think you're on their side or not. What is deemed a Christian, what is deemed a European enough, that changes over time depending on who's in charge. You'd be well to remember that, lest history tell you otherwise. Speaking of history, time to go into our second segment here about what is good about America. I mentioned a little bit ago, we are a country of immigrants. But not just that. Let's discuss. You see, in those videos, Matt Walsh, Charlie Kirk, they fail to talk about things that might disprove their ideals. It's a little annoying if you ask me. Matt Walsh rubs away the idea about America being a melting pot because he can't seem to think of any time before the 60s where we were actually a melting pot. Well, buckaroo, buckle up. I'm going to talk about more than just the 60s here. You see, Charlie Kirk mentions how America is not a country of immigrants. We are a country of settlers because only settlers can build up the country. And when you have nothing, then, well, you haven't built a country yet. People immigrate to a country already built, but that wasn't settled yet, right? Well, Charlie Kirk fails to read his history, as is so often the case. You see, America was founded on more than just white Puritan Christians. For you see, one of the first casualties of the American Revolution was not a Christian white. It was, in fact, a man by the name of Crispus Attucks, a black man of Native American descent as well. He was the first casualty of the American Revolution and the Boston Massacre. We forget that because this country was not built purely on white European Christians. We got to remember that because this country will continue to operate under not just white European Christians. For you see, even at its inception, America has been more than just white European Christians. The Republic itself, I mentioned how democracy was invented by the Greeks, but it actually existed as well outside of Europe, untouched by European influence, before the founding of the new nation. The Iroquois Confederacy is something I like to talk about a lot with some of my friends and folks because it's a story that doesn't get told too much. The Confederacy was a nation of joint tribe that had itself a fairly thriving democracy at the time of the Constitution. They helped with questions. When the Founding Fathers couldn't think of an answer sometimes, they would refer to them because they had already had a system set up. They don't get credited as much, but luckily our country in the past has made an attempt to rectify that fact. But you see, a country is not simply the founding document of which it gets its laws, it's also its people. And over the last 200 some odd years, America's had a lot of people. Some of those folks get swung under the rug to make way for other nationalistic heroes that might paint a better narrative. Well, no more. The Fireside Chats is proud to present to you Americans. You see, as this country was being built, it was being built on the back of immigrants. We speak on the Irish a lot on the East Coast, but the West Coast had a lot of Chinese immigrants as well. Those are non-white, non-Christian immigrants that built the railroad, connected this land. Before that, California wasn't really a thing. You had to sail all the way around South America. Now, thanks to their hard work, their labor, well, they helped build the West. Even when we think of the West, such as the term cowboy, of which I am so proud to be partially one, we fail to realize that the terminology came from Mexico and Mexican immigrants. Folks that were part of the Western world before America managed to take it from the War of Mexico. That kind of culture, banditos, cowboys, ranchers, a lot of them were working folk. A lot of them were poor. It consisted of whites, Mexicans, blacks, a lot of other folks in the day. They helped settle the West as well. They weren't all pioneers. They weren't all settlers. Some of them were just ranch hands. Every damn one of them helped build America. Just like every damn one of them that helped build the railroad helped build America. But of course, Matt Walsh and Charlie Kirk like to wave all these incidents off. They say that America was founded and the first folks here were white Christians of European descent, mostly Western, that is. Well, they forget that the first slaves here of African descent arrived in 1619, well before the country was ever established. Well before America was even a thought on folks' mind. It was still a new world after all. These folks, for better or worse, and a lot of worse, they helped build America too. On the backs of slaves, a lot of this nation was in fact built. Now, that's not just to gloss over the horrible, horrible history that is slavery. It's to acknowledge the fact that this country, its industries, its agriculture, had a contribution from slaves. That is not something we can forget. And on that subject, I'd like to remind folks that we had a little bit of war over that topic of slavery. You see, this nation was not just built upon the backs of African Americans and other immigrants. It was also saved by them, too. One of the most patriotic stories I ever tell my friends is that of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, Civil War. Oh, we're going a little old school for this one, boys and girls. Buckle up. You see, back in 1863, there was this little conflict known as the Civil War going on. Something that would ultimately destroy or divide the nation or possibly unify it completely, depending on how it goes. Spoiler alert, the right side won. See, it's thanks to heroes like Frederick Douglass and Massachusetts governor at the time, John Andrew, that the first African-American regiment served in the United States Army. Well, I'll clarify actually because facts are important to me. They were one of the first, the second technically, but they were the first major infantry regiment of the United States military. Now, this group was immortalized in the film Glory, of which I happen to be a big fan. Shout out to some of my friends who have been forced to listen to this while I talked about it at work. You see, these folks consisted of mostly free men, but also some escaped slaves. They fought and gave their lives to save the Union. They fought and gave their lives to show that African Americans, that black Americans, could fight and serve just as well as their white counterparts. You see, for the past 100-some-odd years before, they weren't treated as equal. But for the first time in the history of the country, they were given the best thing of equality we had at the time. It was still not great, fellas. But their story and their sacrifice is important. The sacrifice of their leader, Colonel Shaw, who I happen to be a big admirer of, has a story that bears repeating. For you see, those supposed European Christians, well, they weren't particularly nice to the 54th. At the 54th's opening battle, of which they would see the first real combat of the war, they led an attack on a southern fort in South Carolina called Fort Wagner. Some of the highest casualties of the war at the time. Colonel Shaw died in the early hours of the battle. His body fell upon the fort walls before he ever managed to make it inside. It was an African-American soldier that managed to pick up the flag and keep it on, hoisting the colors and managing to live to tell the tale. It is recorded as being said that as he fought valiantly that day, those colors never touched the ground. Now, call me a little bit old school, some folks do, but that seems hella American to me. You see, that man's name was Sergeant William Harvey Carney. His actions on that day were the first actions of the military conflict befitting the Medal of Honor, for which he received one in the year 1900, well before the supposed melting pot era that they like to talk about as being only the 60s afterward. Sergeant Carney was an American hero. He's a goddamn American and a patriot. And this country owes him and the men of the 54th a deep respect. There's a story of that particular battle that always sits well in my little American heart. You see, as the 54th had been mostly defeated and forced to retreat, those that died or were left a casualty on the banks of Fort Wagner, they were gathered into a mass grave. The Confederacy did not particularly like the idea of black soldiers. They made a proclamation stating very clearly that any black men captured wearing an army uniform would be put to death immediately. In fact, the Confederates' hatred was so deep that the only war crimes they were ever pursued after the war was done was that of a Confederate officer who was hung for crimes he committed against wounded black soldiers he captured from a Union hospital. He executed them all on the spot, taking the wounded, taking the sick, just because they were black. But on that day at Fort Wagner, when Colonel Shaw fell in battle, the Confederates decided to bury him in a mass grave. It was considered a dishonor, especially for a military officer. And traditionally, the Confederates and the Union would try to exchange officers in a much more dignified manner. But not Colonel Shaw. He was a man from an abolitionist family in Massachusetts. He was an American. He was a damn patriot. Well, yes, if you know your history, he was a little racist himself. But he still treated his soldiers as equals. He still treated them like men, which was something very rare for the time. Later, after the burial in the mass grave, the Union and the federal government would offer Colonel Shaw's family an opportunity to have his body properly buried at his home cemetery. His family refused, and the reason they did, as so said by themselves, is that we would not have this body removed from where it lies surrounded by his brave and devoted soldiers. We can imagine no holier place than that in which he lies among his brave and devoted followers, nor wish him a better company. And what a bodyguard he has. This is one of my favorite stories about America. It's a story of hardship, of adversity, of free men fighting for a country that they themselves were not treated so great in, to put it very lightly. It is a story that we don't often get told. The fact that Colonel Shaw is not held with such high esteem as that of Lee or others is a damn crime. But this is a story that folks like Matt Walsh and Charlie Kirk would rather you ignore. The 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment was instrumental in changing the tide of the Civil War for one simple fact, is that they encouraged others to join the Army. By the end of the war, about 10% of the U.S. Army was African American. Lincoln credited their actions that day, bolstering the Union at a critical point. But we don't need to look to 200 years ago to show actions of true Americans that deserve every right to be just as American as Matt Walsh or Charlie Kirk think they are. For you see, this country has existed for a long time. And in that time, we have many stories. One of my favorite stories is that of Joe Medicine Crow, a Native American and Medal of Honor recipient who served during World War II. He's one of the last living war chiefs, having conducted 4 brave acts during World War II of tradition in his culture that provide him the title of such. You see, Joe Medicine Crow is a damn war hero, however you want to describe it as such. He was not a Christian, wasn't even of European descent. He still fought for this country, a country that treated his people, to put it lightly, ever so poorly. A country that should idolize him and the work he did defeating the Nazis. He is an American, as far as I'm concerned. He's a Native American. He deserves this land more than anybody else. Well, he did. As all great heroes do, he returned back to our Lord back in 2016. And we like to give a good service to folks like him. Because where I came from, we stand for our veterans. We stand for veterans like Captain Humayun Khan, an Iraq war veteran who died in 2004. Now, you might remember Captain Khan. He was brought up a lot during the 2016 election. You know, when we had that whole argument about Muslims actually being Americans or not. History likes to repeat itself real quick now, don't it? Captain Khan was an American. He was an American of Pakistani descent. He served this nation during a rather fettered time. He was not Christian. He was not European. He was American. You'd be well to remember that. I know the last section of this video I'm going to dedicate to the problems we've had in America, but I'm giving a little bit of a misnomer. The folks on the left, when they describe the issues they have with America, when they call it racist, when they bring up its awful past, long ago or more recent, they're not doing it out of malice. Those on the left, I truly believe, and I consider myself one of them, want America to be better. Matt Walsh presented a question that you saw at the start of this video. What is America? Especially to the left. America is its good and America is its bad. It is a nation of many people. And like all nations, it has a complicated history. Right now, a lot of folks on the left, they ain't feeling particularly patriotic. Hell, they don't even like being called patriots, to be honest with you. They will point to our history of slavery or the KKK and deem, yeah, that's why America's racist. But I got news for you. Those leftists that would say that, you are American too. You are the good and the bad in America. For we are a country of settlers. We are a country of pioneers. We are a country of immigrants. We are a country of many people, good and bad. For every American that fought against progress, such as Strom Thurmond or David Duke, they are American. They are ugly. I'm going to include a little Matt Walsh in there too. But for every one of them, there's a dozen more that fought for progress. For this is a country of horrible bigots, but this is also a country of leaders. A country of inspiring reverence that would give their lives for the pursuit of a better, ideal world. Of modern-day senators that stood up to make history in unfortunate circumstances. America will always be a land of opportunity. It'll be a land that inspires hope. America is not a perfect country. It is not even the best country. But it is a country that is worth fighting for. It is a country worth improving. It is the only country that I got. But I answer Matt Walsh's ridiculous question fully and up front. America is a nation for all peoples. It's not a nation for one group to dominate another. It's not a nation of one religion to prove superior over the other. It is a nation that takes its best and brightest from all corners of the earth, for we do not care your place of origin. See, back in my day, we had a bit of a saying.
You're no longer black, or brown, or yellow, or red. You are now green.
I've spoken a lot about our veterans and the folks that help actually fight for this country. There's a reason Charlie Kirk and Matt Walsh only talk behind it. They ain't ever actually had to work a damn day in their lives. So I present to you there the few of the Fireside Chats. That is America. It is all of you. And I remind you at the end of the day, this land is your land. This land is my land. This land was made for everyone, you and me. These are not new ideals. But for some reason, we got to go back to them. We got to fight for that information to have a seat at the damn table. If you don't like that, well, welcome to America.
I want to talk with you about a number of subjects that directly affect the future of the United States.